UFC 209. Honestly, this card cannot come soon enough. There are a lot of amazing fights on this card, and so far I'm very happy personally because we've not heard any reports of injury. The main card is still intact, but I'm gonna zip it up. I don't want to jinx it. Rather, today we'll be talking about the main event. Tyron Woodley versus Stephen Thompson. A really awesome fight. These two men, they've already fought before. In the first fight, each of them was able to showcase their skill set. Tyron Woodley, of course, was able to showcase just how incredibly powerful and explosive he is. He was able to drop Stephen Thompson twice, actually almost finished him in the fourth round. And for Stephen Thompson, he was able to showcase how much heart he has when it comes to a title fight. The dude was almost out, but he stuck it out. He had the tenacity to hang in there and survived and actually won the championship round, the fifth round. And in some parts of that fight also, Stephen Thompson was able to showcase some flashes of brilliance with the combinations he was able to land on Tyron Woodley. But as always, when it comes to a rematch, which is I love rematches, absolutely do as a fight fan, because with rematches you get to see who is the better student of the art. Because when the first fight happens, everyone is fresh. You barely really know the opponent. Yes, you've had a long time to study your opponent, to see what they're good at, to see what their weaknesses, but you learn about the opponent. You get to really learn about the opponent when you fight them, when you're in the octagon with them. And if you get a chance to do it a second time, that is a very good chance to see who the better student of the art is. And when I watched the first fight, the fighter that in my opinion has the most to learn and the most adjustment to make is Stephen Thompson, because of course he was the guy that got dropped twice. He's the guy that was almost finished. Tyron Woodley was not flawless with his performance, but he was the dominant fighter. He's the guy that hurt Stephen Thompson. He was the guy that was the most closest to finishing the fight. So Stephen Thompson, in my opponent, has the most to learn. He needs to make some very important adjustments in that fight. He needs to look at the last fight and see exactly what he did right and see exactly what he did wrong. Now, when you watch Tyron Woodley, when you watch the guy fight, and when you watch his past fights, the one area that I've personally noticed when I watch and I try to analyze the tape, the one area that I've seen him have issues is when it comes to boxing. Fighters who approach the fight like it's a boxing match. And we all know, we've all seen him perform. We've all seen that he has a tendency to back up against the cage with his back directly against the cage. That really limits his movement. And if you really want to see why that habit is very bad in a fight, you need to watch the fight that Tyron Woodley had versus Rory McDonald. Rory was able to exploit that habit to the fullest degree. He pinned Tyron Woodley against the cage repeatedly and was able to pepper the guy with combinations. He completely shut down every single offense that Tyron Woodley could possibly bring to a fight. And when I watched certain parts of the first fight between Woodley and Stephen Thompson was able to do that. He was able to get him against the cage a few times. And when he did that, he was able to land some very, very incredible combinations on him. When I look at this fight, in my opinion, Stephen Thompson needs to approach this with a more boxing-centered style. And when you look at the first fight, when he approached it more as a boxer, that's when he had the most success. He did not have a lot of success with his kicks. I mean, we saw what happened. The first leg kick he threw, Tyron was able to take him down to the ground, held him down the whole entire round, beat him up, bloodied him up. But when Stephen was able to do damage, when he was able to have a lot of success, was when he approached the fight like it was a boxing match. When he's in the conventional stance, he pressures Tyron Woodley against the cage and he peppers him with combination. Tyron is he's not a counter puncher. That's the first thing you need to realize. When he backs up against the cage, he's not using head movement to sway strikes and return fire. He's standing there blocking shots like that, trying to parry. And when he's doing that, fighters can place shots in between. Every single place you see an opening, you can place those shots. Rory McDonald was able to do that. Rory will back Tyron Woodley up against the cage and land a few combinations. He would go high, low repeatedly, and Tyron would just stand there trying to cover up rather than counter back. I think Stephen Thompson needs to approach the fight in that way again. He needs to be more aggressive. In my opinion, he absolutely does. He needs to put pressure on Tyron. The second the fight starts off, Push him back to the cage, use your jab, go high, low, put pressure on him, try to freeze Tyron Woodley. And it's not that difficult to freeze him if you can pressure him against the cage. We've seen that happen repeatedly. When it comes to specific strikes, I like Stephen Thompson's straight to the body followed by a straight to the head. I really like that. He leads with that very well. And if you watch the fight that Rory McDonald had against Woodley, he was doing that very well. There's something about going high-low on Tyron Woodley that just freezes the guy completely up. He doesn't know what to do. When you go low, you start with a straight, follow up with a left hook. Or you start with a jab, follow up with a straight to the head. If you do that repeatedly against Tyron Woodley, he completely freezes up and you can just play target practice with them. One more thing that I noticed in the first fight was that Tyron throws a very lazy jab. When he jabs, he throws out the jab and then lets his hand fall. And very rarely does Tyron return the jab to the guard to protect himself. When a fighter throws a jab like that, they are very, very open for the pull counter. When you pull back, you sway back and you fire off a shot. And in certain parts of the fight, Stephen Thompson was able to land the pull counter over and over again. In my opinion, he needs to pull counter every single lazy jab that Tyron throws. It is a very, very effective straight shot to throw. Once you pull counter, Tyron backs up, you back him up against the cage, and once he has his back against that cage, then you start to pepper him. Don't just sway the jab. In the fight, you will see Stephen Thompson. He was able to pull back on so many jabs. Tyron will throw the jab, he pulls back. He can see that coming a million miles away. Rather than just pulling back, pull back and add something to it. Pull back counter, just like Conor McGregor does. Pull back, counter that shot, push Tyron Woodley backward. If you want to throw kicks, in my opinion, I would not go low because as we've seen, Tyron is able to catch that leg kick, take you down, and pound you out. If you want to go with kicks, watch how Rory McDonald threw his kicks. Rory, consistently, over and over again, he went for the head kick. He either goes for the head kick or he goes for a kick down the middle, like a front kick to the head or a front kick to the body. Those kicks are harder to catch. Those kicks are harder to time. If your goal is to take the opponent down, I would go with high kicks, front kicks, long range weapons, and stay boxing. Keep the boxing base. Push him back and land combinations. For Stephen Thompson to have success in this fight, I really believe he needs to keep up a higher work rate than Tyron. Tyron does a really good job when he has a lot of stamina. He's a very explosive guy. He can explode forward, land combinations, but the second he starts to slow down, he becomes extremely flat-footed, as we've seen in the past. So Stephen needs to come into this fight extremely well conditioned. He needs to keep up a high work rate. No matter what, you need to be the pressure fighter. Tyron Woodley only does well when he's the guy moving forward. When he's pushing forward, he's extremely dangerous. But if you're pushing him back, and you're landing combinations, it doesn't have to be power shots. Just keep up a higher work rate. Jab, straight, high, low repeatedly. He will freeze up. He does not counter shots going backwards very well. He's going to be very easy to hit. That is the approach that I believe Stephen Thompson needs to take to be able to beat this guy in this rematch. For Tyron Woodley, I know that it's going to be very, very tempting to look at the fight and tell yourself, I don't have much to change. I'm the guy that hurt him. I'm the guy that dropped him. I'm the guy that was very close to finishing that fight. But in my opinion, that would be the very wrong approach to take. There's always something to learn. There's always something to change. There's always something to improve. And if you look at the second, the third, and the fifth round, those rounds were won clearly by Stephen Thompson. And those rounds were won because he had his back against the cage. You had your back against the cage. You were not countering off of the shots. You were just blocking. When you're just blocking like that, they will find clean openings. These are very high level strikers you're dealing with. They will find openings and pepper you with shots. When I think about Tyron Woodley and I think about fights that he did a really good job, I'm thinking about the Carlos Condit fight. Carlos Condit came out in that fight and actually pushed him backwards like Rory McDonald did. But in that fight, Tyron did a much better job countering, moving backwards. He will back up, lead with a straight. He landed that stuff repeatedly on Carlos Condit. Every single time Carlos will stumble, he will explode forward, grab a clinch, and he was also using reactive takedowns. Carlos Condit would throw a shot, miss. Tyron would reduce his level, drop down, fire off a double leg, and put him on his back. This is how he needs to fight this fight. I believe that he needs to push forward. He cannot allow himself to be put against the cage. If he does it a second time, in a second fight, in a rematch against Stephen Thompson, who is a very good student of martial arts, in my opinion, I don't think he's going to get away with it. I think it's going to end up looking like his fight against Rory McDonald. If you're going to back up against the cage, counter as you're backing up. Don't just back up and block. Back up with combinations. Clear ground, fire off a combination, and don't just depend on one shot. When talking about Stephen Thompson, I was talking about the pull counter. There's something that Tyron Woodley did in the first fight that I thought was very, very smart. I believe he noticed that Stephen was trying to pull counter him repeatedly, so he faked the jab. He faked the jab, threw a shot that looked like a jab. Stephen Thompson pulled back. As he pulled back to counter with the straight, Tyron fired off his own straight and dropped him. That's how he dropped him the first time. He faked the jab and followed up with a straight. That was a very intelligent thing to do. That is the most effective way to counter a fighter that wants to pull counter you. You need to follow up your jab. Don't just throw the lazy jab and return. If you throw a jab, follow up with a straight. Don't just throw the jab. I think Tyron is going to need to do that again in the fight. Enough with the lazy jabs. He does that all the time. You throw a jab, you return, you don't pull your hand back to the guard, you leave yourself wide open for counters. And against a guy like Stephen Thompson, who is very fast, very fluid, he has very good reflexes, you cannot do that. If you're going to jab, follow up with a shot. He's very powerful. He can definitely do that. Tyron Woodley also has a tendency of throwing one shot at a time. I think he's going to do better if he can string a few combinations together. And one important strike that I don't feel he implements in his fights enough, a very powerful strike, is his leg kick. You don't have a worry of getting taken down by Stephen Thompson. I don't imagine Stephen Thompson trying to take Woodley down. Throw leg kicks. If he's pushing forward, he has a really wide stance. Stephen has a really, really wide stance. The leg kick is right there. With that karate stance, it's going to be very difficult to lift up your leg and check it. There's a very good reason why Muay Thai fighters keep the front leg really light. As they're bouncing, they keep the front leg really light because it's easier to lift it up and check. When you're in a karate stance, that front leg, you put a lot of weight on that front leg. It's harder to lift up and check it. It's always there. Tyron Woodley has one of the most powerful leg kicks you will ever see. The man's thighs are so freaking massive. One leg kick is enough to completely blow up your knee. And I think he needs to fire off that leg kick, especially if he's backing up. In his fight against Rory McDonald, he did that very well. For a little bit, he will back up, fire off a leg kick, and you will see those leg kicks start doing damage, start affecting Stephen Thompson's movement. His overall movement speed is going to slow down. He's going to start worrying about that leg kick. Then you can start going high. So for Woodley, I would really like him to, one, not put his back against the cage like he always does. I don't think he's going to be able to get away with doing that in this second fight. Two, I believe he needs to be a little bit more aggressive. He needs to throw more combinations. Three, he needs to go for reactive takedowns. And four, he needs to use that leg kick. Every single time you see an opening for that leg kick, fire it off. Keep firing that leg kick off. It is going to pay a dividend in the fight. So we've looked at both fighters. We've looked at what they are good at. We've looked at what I personally think they should try to improve in the fight. What is my actual prediction for this fight? I'm going to go with Stephen Thompson. I really am. Even though Woodley was able to drop him twice in the fourth round, and even though Woodley was the guy that was the closest to finishing that fight the first time, I'm going to go with the guy that I look at as a better student of the art. Tyron Woodley has had so many fights already where this guy puts his back against the cage and he has not improved that even a little bit. I know he says the reason he does it is so that he can fire forward and push forward and have a long way, but there's a very good reason why fighters don't do that. There's no excuse for doing that. I don't care what the reasoning behind it is. There's a very good reason why fighters don't do that. And if a fighter exploits that, like Rory McDonald does, you will see just how terrible that habit is. He has not improved that. He keeps banking on that overhand shot. And against a fighter like Stephen Thompson, who has a lot of tools, who's a student of the art, who can look at a fight and see what he did wrong and actually make improvements, I think Stephen Thompson's gonna come out in this second fight and completely change up everything. Every single mistake he made, I don't think he's going to repeat. I think he's going to pressure Tyron Woodley. There's gonna be a pressure-based style of fighting. He's gonna pin him against that cage. He's going to pepper him with strikes, and I think he's gonna be able to win a decision. I don't really see him finishing Tyron Woodley unless he's able to land something crazy like a spinning kick to the head or a head kick, or just break him down. Either way, I think I'm gonna go with Stephen Thompson 5-round decision. That's my prediction. But as always, I am not a coach, I am not a trainer, I am not a fighter. I don't claim to know anything. All I am is a fight fan that loves watching tapes, loves watching and breaking down tape, and all I can do is give you a prediction. I'm not saying I know exactly how the fight is gonna go. I have no clue what's gonna happen. Mixed martial arts is extremely unpredictable. One day you could think this guy is gonna win, and he goes out there, screws things up, and gets knocked out. Luke Rockhold versus Michael Bisping. There are a lot of examples out there. So I can't tell you I am 100% sure this right here is what's gonna happen. All I can do is make an educated guess, and that is what I've done. I'm gonna go with Stephen Thompson 5-round decision. Let me know in the comment section what your prediction is. Who do you think is gonna win this fight? How do you think they're gonna win the fight? Very eager to read what your predictions are in the comment. Thank you so much for watching. It means a lot to me. I will see you guys very, very shortly for the next prediction. Keep yourself safe.